Rogal Dorn, also known as the Praetorian of Terror, was the Primarch of the 7th Legion of the Legione Astartes, the Imperial Fists. Despite being seen as a dour and humorless individual, Dorn was highly respected for not only his stoicism, but also for his unquestioning and unflinching loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium as a whole. Dorn was also known for his brutal honesty, as the Primarch was said to always speak the truth regardless of how bitter and undesirable it may be to hear, as well as refusing to spread any sort of falsehoods, even if such lies could prove beneficial to him or his legion. In recognition of these traits, Dorn's brother, Rabute Guilliman of the Ultramarines, would name the Imperial Fists Primarch as one of the Dauntless Few, those fellow Primarchs that Guilliman deemed to be the most dependable and trustworthy. Guilliman would even erect a great statue dedicated to Rogal Dorn within the Hall of Heroes upon the crag, which would stand alongside those dedicated to Guilliman, Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, and Leman Russ of the Space Wolves. During the events of the Horus Heresy, following the revelation that the War Master Horus Lupercal had instigated a rebellion against the Emperor, Rogal Dorn would be appointed as the new War Master in all but name, and during much of the conflict, the Primarch would focus much of his efforts towards the monumental task of preparing Terra's defences against the inevitable Traitor Legion assault. Dorn would not only have multiple defensive measures implemented upon the world itself, and around the Imperial Palace in particular, but he would also configure 5 separate spheres of defense that were spread throughout the Sol system, which were intended to delay and contain Traitor Legion forces for as long as possible, while slowly whittling them down. The Primarch would also serve as a member of Terra's War Council, whose members also included Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra and Grand Master of Assassins, and Constantine Valdor, the Captain General of the Legio Custodes, just to name a few. During the course of the Solar War, mere hours before Terra would finally be besieged by his traitorous brothers, a demonic incursion would erupt upon the Imperial Fists flagship, the Phalanx, and the Primarch would even face off against Samus, the Demon Prince of the Ruinstorm, in mortal combat. When the Siege of Terra finally began, Rogal Dorn would almost single-handedly coordinate the defences of the Imperial Palace, while his brothers Jagatai Khan of the White Scars and Sanguinius of the Blood Angels would battle alongside the Loyalist defenders and even lead the occasional sortie against the traitors. In the final hours of the conflict, Dorn would accompany the Emperor, Sanguinius, and a small number of Loyalist troops as they teleported aboard Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. However, during the teleportation process, Rogal Dorn would become separated from his father and brother, and the Primarch would be forced to battle his way to the bridge in order to reach them. Despite his best efforts, Dorn would arrive too late, as not only had Sanguinius been slain by the traitor War Master, but the Emperor had suffered a mortal wound during his duel with Horus. Stricken with grief, Dorn would return the Emperor's body to Terra and inter him within the life support systems of the Golden Throne. The Primarch would then lead his legion on a crusade of penitence to destroy the traitor legions, in hopes of atoning for what the Primarch viewed as his failure to protect his father and brother. This would eventually lead to the Battle of the Iron Cage, where the Imperial Fists would suffer horrendous casualties at the hands of the Iron Warriors' traitor legion, and the Fists would have been destroyed in their entirety were it not for both Perturabo's arrogance and the timely arrival of reinforcements from the Ultramarines. Shortly after this, Dorn would reluctantly agree to the terms of Guilliman's Codex Astartes, and would split the remainder of his legion into a number of smaller chapters. Rogal Dorn would last be seen during one of the earliest Black Crusades, with the Primarch commanding numerous Imperial forces against a vast traitor legion armada. Dorn would then proceed to personally lead a boarding party onto one of the traitor flagships, where he would battle fiercely against countless hordes of heretic Astartes before ultimately vanishing without a trace. only his severed hand, which has now become a holy relic to the Imperial Fists and their successor chapters, was recovered by his sons, leaving his final fate unclear. So what fate truly befell Rogal Dorn? Initially, it would appear that Rogal Dorn had simply fallen in battle. While Dorn was indeed a Primarch, a being akin to a demigod that is both physically stronger and more durable than a typical Astartes, he would still have been but one warrior against countless enemies. There are a number of sources that do strongly support the possibility of Rogal Dorn having perished at the hands of the traitor legions. One of the earliest sources to document this is that of the novel Space Marine. Here, it is stated outright that the Primarch's entire skeleton is in the possession of the Imperial Fists, and is, unquestioningly, the most important relic in their possession.
Directly opposite was the inner chapel to Rogal Dorn, crafted of blocks of compressed sulphurous amber, divided by striations of lapis lazuli, and housing the Fist's holiest relic, the mighty skeleton, embedded in clear amber, contoured to body form of the Primarch himself. The initiates all kneeled, staring at those great bones within that jaundiced false fossil resinous flesh.
It is worth noting, though, that the canonicity of the events that occur within this particular novel are questionable at best, as Space Marine is one of the few novels that has been explicitly stated to be non-canon by Black Library. But the idea that Rogal Dorn is indeed dead is also supported with a few additional sources. The book Death Watch Rites of Battle details the Primarch's final moments after he had boarded the traitor flagship with the following passage.
The Primarch fell in battle against the forces of chaos, resisting a Black Crusade, one of the periodic and devastating incursions by the traitor legions from their hellish sanctuary worlds within the Eye of Terror. Dorn and 3 companies of the Imperial Fists mounted a masterful series of boarding actions against the Crusade's warships, crippling drives and life support systems, and even capturing weapon batteries and turning them against other Chaos vessels. Eventually, however, the enemy cornered Dorn and his warriors as he launched a final attack on the bridge of the Chaos flagship. None survived to tell the glorious tale of the Primarch's last stand. The chapter's chief librarian found his Primarch's body on the bridge in a chilling reprise of Dorn's discovery of the wounded Emperor, and bore him away before the stricken flagship escaped back into the infernal depths of the Eye of Terror.
However, this particular passage is in itself contradicted by other pieces of information located within the very same book, as it is also claimed that Rogal Dorn's body was never found, and that only his hand was recovered by his gene sons. The idea of only Rogal Dorn's hand being recovered by his gene sons is reaffirmed within the 8th edition Space Marine Codex, which returns some level of ambiguity to his fate. But one piece of information supporting the idea of Rogal Dorn having died, which does not appear to be contradicted in such an obviously egregious manner, would be documented within the novella Prince of Crows. Shortly after the rediscovery of Comrade Crimson, the Primarch of the Night Lord's Legion, Rogal Dorn, alongside his brothers Ferrus Manus, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Lorgar of the Word-Bearers, would accompany the Emperor to the world of Nostramo in order to meet with their new brother. Comrade Crimson, who had been cursed with the gift of precognition, would gaze upon each of his brothers in turn, and thanks to his psychic abilities, the Night Lord's Primarch would appear to learn of their ultimate fates. When Crimson turned his future sight upon Lorgar, he would see the Word-Bearer's Primarch crowned with psychic fire. When he focused upon Fulgrim, the Night Lord witnessed his brother boasting a slithering and laughing form, and when he fixated upon Ferrus Manus, he would witness his brother's severed head being cradled in the hands of another warrior. When Crimson looked upon Rogal Dorn, he witnessed the following.
The Night Haunter said nothing. In his mind's eye, he saw the giant die, dragged down by 100 murderers in a dark tunnel, their knives and swords wet with the warrior's blood.
While Curze's visions almost always witnessed the worst possible outcome, the fact that Lorgar and Fulgrim both ascended to demonhood, with Lorgar's form sporting a crown of flames, and Fulgrim being gifted a slithering, serpentine form, combined with Ferrus Manus being beheaded during the course of the Istvan V Dropsite massacre, would appear to strongly support the possibility that Dorn had also been slain. These visions would also be referenced again within the novel Conrad Curze, the Night Haunter, where in addition to Ferrus Manus being beheaded and Rogal Dorn being torn apart, Curze mentions that he also witnessed Sanguinius being struck down, which indeed came to pass during the final hours of the Horus Heresy. Despite this, there exists a minute possibility that somehow, somewhere, Rogal Dorn could still be alive. This particular prospect is partially supported within the novel The Hunt for Vulkan. During the War of the Beast, the Salamander's Primarch Vulkan, who had disappeared shortly after the events of the Horus Heresy, would once again be located by Imperial forces, battling against scores of orcs upon the world of Caldera. To this end, the last surviving member of the Imperial Fists and its de facto chapter master, Corland, would lead a task force to the world, in hopes of convincing Vulkan to aid the Imperium in their struggle against the innumerable forces of an orc warlord known as the Beast. Vulkan would initially refuse, but after learning that the Beast was mustering his forces upon the world of Ulanor, the Primarch would agree to help, providing that Corland's forces assisted him in destroying an attack moon that was being constructed in orbit of the world. As Vulkan and Corland proceeded upon their mission, the Primarch would state the following to Corland.
"Fight well, son of Dorn. Your actions honor his name, and I will tell him so."
While Corland was denied the opportunity to ask Vulkan the exact meaning behind his words, this would indeed suggest, at least initially, that Rogal Dorn could very well be alive somewhere within the galaxy. Although admittedly, it is equally possible that Vulkan believed that there was a chance of him being unable to survive such a mission, and so would speak to Dorn of Corland's bravery once the Primarchs were reunited in death. But given that Dorn launched a series of penitent crusades with his legion following the events of the Horus Heresy, it's certainly possible that the Primarch could have embarked on something akin to a suicide mission, where he would personally attempt to hunt down and slay every traitor Astartes and Primarch that he encounters. This wouldn't be entirely outside the realm of possibility, as Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard, would journey into the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror in an attempt to hunt down and slay the traitor Primarchs. The fact that Vulkan said he would speak to Dorn about Corland's actions could also suggest that the Salamander's Primarch knows, or at the very least, knew where Dorn was. Indeed, it may even be possible that Dorn and Vulkan had both chosen to abandon their respective legions in order to embark on such a mission, only to become separated from one another, which in turn would lead to Vulkan journeying to Caldera after learning that the world had been invaded, in order to fulfill his oaths to ensure that the world remained protected. Others, however, have speculated that the Primarch had instead chosen to abandon his sons in order to return to Terra, so that he could watch over and protect the remains of his father, to atone for his previous self-perceived failures. After all, it's well documented that Dorn felt immense guilt for his inability to aid the Emperor during his duel against Horus upon the Vengeful Spirit, with the Primarch believing that it was his failure to reach the bridge in time which led to the Emperor being mortally wounded by the War Master. As such, if Rogal Dorn did indeed survive the events that led to his disappearance, then it's logical to assume that the Primarch would have taken it upon himself to remain by his father's side upon Terra, where he would stand sentinel within the confines of the Emperor's throne room, only to emerge on rare and necessary occasions so that he may provide his own unique input into any of the Imperium's political affairs. The Emperor's immense psychic presence within the throne room is draining on both a physical and spiritual level, with those custodies assigned to act as his bodyguards within the confines of the Sanctum Imperialis, known as the Companions, needing to be rotated out to rest and recuperate on a semi-regular basis. However, since Rogal Dorn is a Primarch, and therefore both more physically powerful and spiritually robust than even a Custodian, then it is theoretically possible that Dorn is able to withstand being by his father's side for longer periods of time, perhaps almost indefinitely. This would explain as to why he would rarely have to emerge from the throne room. The idea that Dorn could be hidden somewhere upon Terra is partially supported within Deathwatch Rites of Battle with the following quote from Rogal Dorn himself.
For more than 10 millennia, during which our enemies within and without have fallen, this Imperium has stood fast. Those who wished it to fall have failed, and will continue to fail as long as we, the Emperor's chosen sons, uphold our duty. Only by protecting humanity can we truly honor the proudest monument to his great works. For the Emperor!
The fact that Rogal Dorn is describing the past 10 millennia would seem to indicate that the Primarch is indeed still alive, and not only that, but also somewhat involved in the politics of the Imperium itself. While it admittedly could be possible that Rogal Dorn gave this speech before his disappearance, this seems incredibly unlikely. If Rogal Dorn had simply been referring to when the Emperor had first began his conquests, starting with the Terran Unification Wars, then this would mean that Dorn had given this particular speech circa M39, given the fact that the Emperor of Mankind would not reveal himself to the greater bulk of humanity, nor start unifying Terra under his rule through his campaigns of conquest until sometime around M29. The major setback with this particular piece of information is that given the specific quote is, once again, contradicted within the exact same book, which states that Dorn is dead, alive, and missing all at the same time, with both his entire body and just his hand being recovered by the Imperial Fists, all within the span of a few pages, this means that the validity of this particular quote is debatable at best. Overall, it is doubtful that Rogal Dorn could be somewhere upon Terra, especially given the recent return of his brother, Rabute Guilliman. After all, the return of Rabute Guilliman was seen by the Imperium as an unprecedented, galaxy-shaking event, as one of the Emperor's loyalist sons had returned to aid the Imperium in its darkest hour. If Rogal Dorn was on Terra, then surely the first action of the Imperial Fists Primarch would be to meet with his brother, or at the very least, emerge to take command of Terra's forces in a defense of the Imperial Palace when it was assaulted by the demonic legions of the Chaos God Khorne. Even if Dorn had chosen not to leave the Emperor's side, surely Guilliman would have made mention of being reunited with his brother, especially since the Ultramarines Primarch had spent several days conversing with his father within the confines of the throne room following the events of Guilliman's Terran Crusade. Ultimately, it seems highly unlikely that Rogal Dorn could still be alive. But if the Praetorian of Terra somehow still lives, then perhaps one day he may return to aid the Imperium in its darkest hour, and in doing so, perhaps he may finally forgive himself for his self-perceived failures. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.